Welcome again to Two Grown Men. As usual, I have Laomi and myself, Yemi,
Hello, everyone. How are we today?
and we have Eric with us joining us on this special episode. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. What's up, guys? What's up? Yeah,
Hello,
let's
Eric.
rock and roll. Yeah,
Ni
yeah,
hao, Eric. Ni hao.
yeah. Ni hao, ni hao.
Ni
Right.
hao.
Yeah.
So today we're diving into one of the most talked about issues in global trade. Certainly over the last couple of days, the rising tensions between the US and China sparked again by a fresh wave of tariffs as the US government imposes new duties targeting key Chinese industries. Currently, I think about 125% tariff on China. This will impact electric vehicles, semiconductors, and we are seeing a ripple effect being felt far beyond Washington and Beijing. So today we're going to talk about what does this mean from China's perspective. How is the Chinese government, its businesses, and its people responding to what some are calling economic warfare? Some other people look at it as justified protectionism. So we're going to unpack this complex issue with our subject matter expert Eric joining us today, and he's going to bring valuable insight into how these developments are shaping both China and the US and its relationship with the global world, which no doubt everyone is feeling. So I'll let Eric just continue from here. Eric, please take it away.
Hi. Thanks, Yemi. I'm not really a subject expert. I think it's just an interest of curiosity and understanding of the motive. I always like to look at the motivation behind every move. Right? There's always a reason. Sometimes you really need to look under the hood, not just on the surface and the propaganda that you're receiving. Uh, I this whole situation is to me is pretty ridiculous, and to a lot of my associates, I think we can never figure out why there's such a move. But based on the formula that has been given and how the tariff has been tabulated, it's ridiculous. I mean, to me, I'm lack of a better word. I think it's ridiculous because if you're going to, let's be logic and rational about the whole thing. If you're going to address the trade deficit, right, it's the whole reason behind it, and you want to bring jobs back and be, there's a popular policy for the U.S. politics, right? It's easier said than done, all right. You're talking about, let's say, let's unpack one point at a time, right?
Okay.
Trade deficit, trade deficits. I mean, basically, to address deficits means you have to produce something, whether it's goods and services, for somebody to import it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goods or services, because even though U.S. do not produce manufacturing today, they have, I think that if I'm not wrong, I think U.S. GDP based on manufacturing is about maybe 10, not more than 20% of GDP, right? And the rest of 80% is basically out of from services, right? It's a very knowledge-based economy as he has evolved, and he has exported the manufacturing out, exported it out to less developed country because of cost. So we have evolved our supply chain into more of a global supply chain than we were in the 1930s, where they actually, if you look back into history, tariff was then also imposed during the 1930s. But presently versus then, the supply chain, global supply chain has evolved tremendously, right? Tremendously. I mean, it's like I think a lot of things is from the whole supply chain is global, and it's a lot of components are coming from different part of the world, and then you do assembly, right? Let's say that's where you face like, you need Mexico, you need Canada, because they are part of the supply chain. They're supplying certain components for you to assemble in the US, right? So if you are imposing tariff based on trade deficit, that's not going to work. Basically, that's not going to work because that's the correct way of approaching it. Is either you start producing, but actually, because we there are countries like for example Singapore, we have a trade deficit against the US because we import more services from the US, not product, because US is not manufacturing. So there's a lot of services coming in. So we are also on the trade deficit. Services cost something, so it's also part of a product, right? And we are not exporting enough to the US, and we are facing deficit. But yet, under Trump's tariff policy, we have to pay a baseline of 10% tariff to the US. So what's the logic behind it? if you are using trade deficit as an excuse to implement a tariff against your trading partners, so yes, you say if I have a deficit with China and I impose the tariff so that I will Chinese import into the US and try to make the Chinese buy US product, but there's a limitation to that. Whether can I afford? A lot of countries can't afford the high end stuff coming out from US. You can afford what they are exporting because it's low end. It's within your budget, within the budget of consumption. So this whole trade war and tariff is pretty ridiculous, and I'm trying to find exactly what's the motivation behind that. Why Trump himself with his team, and his team is, I don't think they are very qualified economists, coming out with such a policy. So either that they are trying to make, I mean, there's a bit of conspiracy theory down here, right? Either that they are trying to crash the market. By crashing the market, they can short the market. They're gonna make money out of it. And then now, out of nowhere, they suddenly pull back and say, okay, I'm going to pause for 90 days. Only targeting China now. Most of the countries are on pause for 90 days. And then the next day, you see the market going up. But it's just a knee-jerk reaction in the market, right? But then when everything settled down, it's like, so what is 90 days? What's after 90 days? So the market starts to realize this is not a long-term solution. There's no direction at all. Everybody's in a panic mode, right? But then I start to realize with added information, there's a sell-off in the bond market. This is why they paused for 90 days. Okay.
Wow. There's a sell-off.
There's a sell-off in the bond market. So if the equity market is affected, so the liquidity, the portfolio will change. Means you take your liquidity from the equity market, and then you start to go into the bond, because bond is a safer bet, right? Right? Bond is a safer bet.
You're talking about the government bonds, right?
Yeah, treasury bonds, treasury bonds,
bonds.
right?
Okay.
For example, right? Bonds is safer than equity. That's known, right? So, but yet the equity market went down because of the tariff, the trade war. At the same time, they expect the bond market to go up because people will be buying bonds, but instead of selling bonds. But now, interesting thing is the bond market, they are selling bonds now. So when you sell bonds, the interest rate will start to go down. Means the demand, no, sorry, the interest rate will start to go up because the demand is low, supply is high. You have to give a better yield for someone to buy, right? Because demand is low, right? So when the interest rate goes up, then your bond market and your whatever you're owing because of your deficit of trillions of dollars based on your interest rate, it will go up. That will affect your interest payment. So it's a miscalculation. They're thinking that when the equity market goes down, the bond market will go up. That's the natural progression, right? Because you shift your portfolio into the bond market. But instead of there's a demand for bond, there's no demand. There's actually a sell-off of bond. This is why suddenly Trump realized it and said, okay, I'm going to pause 90 days. I have to cool this down because this is not normal, because there's a sell-off in the bond market. And all the hedge funds that took position in the bond market are being burned down because there's a major sell-off. Eventually, if the sell-off becomes too huge, the Federal Reserve has to come back and support it. And the Federal Reserve today is supporting, they are standing by $2 trillion to support the bond market from the hedge funds, the big guys. You talk about BlackRock and etc. And the banks. Because if the rest of the world do not buy the bonds, the American banks, the banks will have to, they are forced to buy the bond. Somebody has to buy it. So if the banks are forced to buy the bonds, the American banks are forced to buy the bonds, whereas the rest of the world do not want to buy it, and it's a sell-off. The Federal Reserve will then have to print liquidity into the markets to support the bank to buy it, because Federal Reserve cannot buy the bonds. They go through the banks, right? So the Federal Reserve will print $2 trillion
You have to print
to give
money.
it to the bank, to support the bond market, because there's a major sell-off. Because once there's a sell-off, the hedge funds guys will also sell off. Eventually, the investment banks will have to buy it. So that's the reason why there's a pause for 90 days.
Ah.
So what's the meaning of someone selling off your bonds? Means basically the globally, people are losing faith in the US dollar. Means this is not just a trade war anymore, it's a currency war.
Hmm.
Means if I will sell off your bonds, I'll increase your interest rate. Can you imagine the interest they got to service on the trillions of dollars they are owing, 30 over trillions or 40 trillion today? Those are all bonds.
That's a lot of money.
So think about it. Just because of this tariff, this trade war, over a week, there's a sell-off in bond market. The Feds have to prepare easily $2 trillion to be printed, to be passed to the bank, the investment banks in America, to support the bond market. So this is a tsunami.
It's huge. It's huge, Eric. Absolutely huge. And thanks for the explanation and the insight. I know you covered a couple of things there, I wanted to ask a couple of questions based on that, but one at a time. So, in terms of from your perspective, what do you see as the main reason for the U.S. ramping up tariffs at this time? Do you see it as economic protectionism? What I'm talking about is, when Trump was elected, same as 2016, he came with the MAGA theme, "Make America Great Again," and he's repeated that theme and mantra in 2025. Is this more of a economic protectionism, or do you see this more as a geopolitical strategy to ensure that America remains the only of course, we know America is not the only superpower, but to establish its dominance, and this is what this whole trade tariffs are about? Or do you think it's also about trying to get America to a surplus? America has not been in a surplus since 1971, which is the last time. It's been in a deficit since then. I don't know, so I'm just trying to understand what your thoughts are on that, on those questions.
Okay, I'm not an economist, but let's talk about logic. Simple logic, right? Business logic. Number one, you want to shift jobs back into manufacturing in America.
Mhm.
It would not happen because now globalization with WTO, the global supply chain, has been ongoing for the past easily 20 years, right?
Mhm.
Easily more than 20, 30 years, right? This global supply. And you want to, it's a structure, it's a systemic issue. How are you going to change a system that has been developed over the past 20 years through WTO? And all corporations are looking for countries because it's all about cost competitiveness, supply chain, right? Very simple. Now, if I were to produce a product in Vietnam or China, doesn't matter, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, manufacturing countries, and it cost me $10. But in order for me to shift back to the US, provided the corporations are willing to set up their plants there, even to set up a plant, you need time to turn around. It easily could be 2 to 3 years to plan. All right, and it will cost you billions of dollars just to set up. It's just like the semiconductors, unless like what Biden did, right? He subsidized certain industries to set up plants down there. Without subsidies, what's the motivation for the corporation to go back there and set up plants for manufacturing in America? Okay, so let's say you subsidize through what Biden tried to do. You
Mhm.
subsidize certain industries to go back into the US to set up their plants down there. Now, the cost of living in America versus Vietnam, your product will end up 3 times, $30. So are the consumer ready to pay $30 where they can get it from Vietnam, produced in Vietnam or China at $10?
This is it.
These are the questions.
So that's going to be a major inflation, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so because you cannot downsize and say, oh, America, now the workers, please, you're going to work like the Vietnamese or the Chinese or the Cambodians and produce the product at $10 because your cost of living in US is so much higher. It's 3 times higher, right? The standard of living is 3 times higher than versus those countries, right? So it doesn't make sense. So at the end of the day, you will end up. What I'm afraid of, now there's inflation based on cost. When the inflation comes to a point, there's too much supply. and there's no demand, then you'll come to stagnation. Stagflation, sorry. After stagflation, I'm very afraid eventually you look at deflation because there's more supply than demand. Right? So it doesn't make sense. It's okay. That's one thing. Now, even if the corporations go and set up their plants, right? Let's play out this scenario.
Yeah.
And do you have that human capital to support the industry? Because most of your human capital are educated in a way in the services industry rather than in manufacturing.
With the financial services, etc. Yes.
It's a knowledge based industry, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
it's so your workforce or your human capital is all based on knowledge base. So how long do you need to change your workforce and your human capital to become blue collar workers? Most of them are white collars, professionals. You think the professionals will go into the factory and work? I mean, this is logic, right? This is simple logic, right? So your education system needs to change. So it's systemic and structural issues now. In order to prepare the human capital to able to serve this industry to produce. They cannot fight China wide. You see, Chinese, they are graduates, they are degree holders, they are diploma holders. So they prepare the diploma holders to do the blue collar job, technical. Even to learn how to be a crane, right? I mean, to learn how to make, how you call that, to operate a crane, there is a diploma course in construction. So those are diplomas. But most of the people today in the US, they are all degree holders. Right? Chinese have prepared, they go accordingly. Education system evolve according to the demand and supply of the workforce in the future. What do you want to go? So it becomes manual, then it becomes intellectual, then it becomes knowledge based. Right? As you progress. Right? But one thing good about China, now back to China.
Okay.
China started the BRI project, Belt and Road Initiative. All right, because they know one day China today is already overdeveloped. They are going into
Overdeveloped.
high end, overdeveloped. They are going into knowledge base now. They are going into high end production. They are going into automation.
AI.
AI. Even their manufacturing are in AI mode now. AI.
For the manufacturing.
Yes.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Example. It used to have maybe, I don't know, 20,000 workers in this factory. But they have AI the thing and automated the thing. Now they only need 2,000 workers.
Wow.
That's the
And
level. That's how.
and they have the same outcome they have the same
Oh,
supply.
and the production efficiency, the productivity went up by 2 times to three times based on this. Means they use automation and AI, reducing workforce, but they're still achieving 3 times above what they used to achieve in the past.
Wow. So they
Using
are winning on
20,000
both
workers.
sides. They're winning on both sides. Right.
Because the Chinese know during the downtime, and if they want to control manufacturing, which they know is very important, right? Manufacturing base. They have evolved and improved their model, their structure, their system by investing, by deficit spending into education, into automation, into R&D. I mean, how in less than 10 years, what is Tesla? Today you're talking about BYD, EVs, you're talking about solar panels. The Chinese can reverse engineer anything and they can do it even better in 5 years. Give them
Eric,
5 years.
when did this start, Eric? Sorry to cut in. When did all this strategic big thinking planning? When did it all start?
Okay, let's talk about Belt and Road, where Xi Jinping came in. Belt and Road, BRI was Xi Jinping's baby. So that was about 2010 to 2012, right?
Okay.
So they already projected because the Chinese always have a 50 years plan,
Hmm.
but they have milestones within the 50 years plan. They have milestones of 15, 15, and 15.
Okay.
Okay, so they do 50 years, but milestone of 15, 15, and 15.
So three different
Right?
quarters where they check. Okay.
I mean, it could be 10 to 15. Let's say there's probably four milestones in the 50 years, right? So BRI, because they know now we are building up our infrastructure in China, and that's where they go into stuff like infrastructure, 5G. They go into advanced development, right? And then they're engineering because of the way they are advancing their own country for the past since 2010 or before that. They're already constructing and doing infrastructure. They have so much experience, and when they were hit by challenges, they were so innovative to come out with new engineering ideas that the world have not seen. Right? They can build a skyscraper in less than in 3 months.
3 months.
I'm not kidding you. I'm in Cambodia now. Giving you an example. Sorry, I digress a little bit.
No, go
In
ahead.
Cambodia, there's a canal project, Cambodian Canal. It's a major canal project to link the canal to the sea down south. The canal is about, if I'm not wrong, 100, I think 150 to 180 kilometers. They say 180 kilometers. The Chinese took this project, and it's going to be a deep canal to a certain extent. Can you imagine? The Chinese can develop the canal 1 kilometer a day. So this canal can be finished in less than 18 months. It's between 12 to 18 months if based on 1 kilometer a day in a year, this canal can be completed. Can you imagine that? I
A
put this
canal.
across a canal, 180-kilometer long canal,
Yeah,
deep
180,
canal,
180 meters. Yes, 180 meters.
Kilometers.
180 kilometers. Yes,
The Funan Teco Canal.
yes, 180. And the Chinese can fulfill that 1 kilometer a day. So they have the technology, they have the human capital because they have been doing construction for the past 30 years.
Hmm.
They export their technology, they export their workforce. They have so much experience in construction infrastructure project for the past 30 years. Nobody does infrastructure like the Chinese. Nobody. Nobody. Right? The high speed rails are out of the world. They are still constructing more high speed rail.
I
Right?
can if I can ch- if I chip in for a second.
Please.
I've spent quite a bit of time in China, multiple trips. So I've been to Guangzhou, to Foshan, to Fujian, to a few of the manufacturing hubs, and like China is the first place I've been to a couple dozen countries where the high speed rails run 24 hours a day, right? China is, I remember my first time, I think China is actually quite misunderstood. I think because a lot of movies and Hollywood and co is, I mean, the movie industry is dominated by the West, by Hollywood, right?
Yes.
And so the image that's presented of China is somewhat backward. So imagine my surprise when I land in China and realize that, oh my God, you're driving from the airport and all you're seeing are 60, 70, 80-story buildings. Not one, not two. It's just there. It's just there. It's just a highway, right? On both sides, right? There are, I will never look at the word tower the same again. I
Hmm.
remember a guy in Dubai telling me that if a building is less than 30 floors, you don't call it a tower. Okay. If it's less than 30 floors in Dubai, you call it a high rise, not a tower. And then I arrive in China and I'm like, wait, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Every single building here is a tower. Okay. 50, 60 floors. And then my experience with WeChat, okay, was the agent that met me at China said, oh, you need to download your WeChat. And then, oh, you need to have a VPN because you can't use your Facebook or whatever it is. But I go into a restaurant. So I'm learning some Mandarin because I can communicate. But I go into a restaurant and I need to order some food. And I'm looking for the waiters. And the guy with says, no, just on your WeChat, scan the menu, and then I'm able to order my food and pay and have my meal delivered without speaking to anybody. And then someone says, oh, I need to introduce you he wants to introduce me to somebody. He makes the introduction via WeChat. Okay? Everything is done via WeChat. We make currency transfers via WeChat. Everything we're doing. At this point, I'm used to using WhatsApp and iMessenger. And it was like, I've gone from a horse. I've gone from riding a horse to driving in a car. All right.
Mm.
And I kept thinking, this is the backward China you're telling me about. Okay. And I go into a couple of factories,
Yep.
and it's like I'm there to order building materials and whatever it is. And the level, and these guys are happy to take you around their factories. Happy to. And then I went to the Canton Fair. And that was eye-opening. The level
Huge.
of production,
Huge.
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 And while I was talking to the guy that took me, he said, we have been around. He said, are you amazed? I said, yes. He said, we have been around for 5,000 years.
5,000.
And that's the thing I want everyone to understand. We have been around for 5,000 years. We are the oldest civilization on this planet. To let the world understand that China is not some backwater. It's not some maybe after people forget that after the Second World War, yes, the Second World War happened and China was more or less a vassal state of Japan during this. But between the Second World War and today, people still think about Chairman Mao and all those struggles. That was a lifetime ago. China is by far the most advanced country in the world today,
in 2025.
Eric, over to you.